Hey everyone, Lee here from the 3D Modeler. Welcome back. In part 2 of our Victorian Facade series in 3ds Max, we wrapped up the scene preparation and modeled the base molding of the pilaster. Now, in part 3, we'll complete the pilaster by modeling both the shaft and the capital. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Now, let's exit the isolation mode by clicking on this icon here in the status bar. Let's go to the front view. And as you can see, with our base molding complete, we still need to model the shaft and the crown of the pilaster. And to model the shaft, we need to create a rectangular spline which snaps to the borders of the top surface of our base molding. So, let's select our base molding, Alt-Q to isolate it, press T to go to the top view, and let's create our rectangular spline from the create panel, shape step, enable the rectangle tool, and let's also enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S. Now let's create a rectangular spline which snaps to the borders of the top surface of our base molding like this. Now I want to make sure that the center of our rectangular spline is perfectly aligned with the center of our base molding in the XY direction. And to do so, I will use the align tool. And to enable the align tool, I will click on its icon here in the toolbar. So let's enable our align tool, and with our rectangular spline selected, let's click on the base molding. Now we are going to align the center of the rectangular spline with the center of the base molding in the XY direction only. Then press OK. Now we are sure that the center of our rectangular spline is perfectly aligned with the center of our base mold. Now back to the front view and let's exit the isolation. Then let's apply a shell modifier to our rectangular spline. So from the modify panel, let's apply a new shell modifier to our rectangular spline. Let's adjust the outer amount to about 50. Then let's apply a new editor poly modifier to our 3D object. Let's enable the vertex editing mode by pressing shortcut 1. Then let's select this group of vertices and let's adjust the height of our shaft to match the one in our reference image like this. Now let's isolate our reference image. As you can see in our reference image, the shaft is a recessed area with panel molding. So let's create these details on our shaft. But first, let's exit the isolation mode. So let's start by creating our recessed area. Select our shaft, Alt-Q to isolate it, press B, switch to perspective view, press 4 to enable the polygon editing mode. Now let's select the front and the right side polygon. Let's insert them. So right click, insert. The amount of insertion will be 6 centimeters and the type of insertion will be by polygon. OK. Now let's extrude them inward by 2 centimeters. So with our polygons selected, right click and extrude. The amount of extrusion will be -2. Press OK. Now we have finished creating our recessed area. Let's exit the isolation mode, back to the front view, and let's change the color of our shaft to the same color of our base molding like this. Now let's create the panel moldings for our shaft. And to do so, I will be using an iterated version of the custom profile we have designed and created earlier. So let's select our main custom profile, hold Shift and drag to make a copy. Hold Control and select our shaft, Alt-Q to isolate them. Now let's zoom in on our profile copy. Let's select it and press 1 to enable the vertex editing mode. Now I want to make it narrower, so I will select these 2 vertices and snap them to this vertex like this. Now we have 2 overlapping vertices at this point. Let's weld them together using the weld option. Now we have created our new custom profile. Now let's create our 2D shape. So from create panel, shape step, enable rectangle tool. Let's also enable the snap tool by pressing shortcut S, and let's create a rectangle spline which snaps to the corners of our resist area like this. Now let's also create the 2D shape for the right side panel molding. So press V to go to the right view, and let's create a rectangle spline which snaps to the corners of our resist area like this. Back to the front view. Now let's select our front 2D shape. From the modify panel, let's apply a new bevel profile modifier to it. The parameters, choose classic, and let's pick our new custom profile. Let's switch to the perspective view to see our progress. As you can see, we still need to adjust the rotation of the profile gizmo. So with our modifier selected, press 1 to activate the profile gizmo, and let's rotate it 180 degrees around the y-axis like this. Now let's drag and drop our modifier to our second 2D shape, and now we have finished creating the panel moldings for our shaft. Let's change their color to the same color of the shaft, and as you can see now we have finished creating the shaft of our pilaster. Back to the front view, and let's exit the isolation mode. And finally, let's model the crown of our pilaster. So let's select our reference image, Alt key to isolate it. Let's zoom in on our crown like this. And to model the crown, we'll split it into two elements, the base element and the ornamental element. And to model the base element, we'll start by creating a rough spline, which will roughly trace the outline of our base element. From create panel, shape step, enable the line tool, and let's create the rough spline, which will roughly trace the outline of our base element. Now let's refine our rough spline. Press 1 to enable the vertex editing mode, and let's refine our spline. I need these two elements to have the same size, and to do so I will use a reference rectangular spline. So let's create a reference rectangular spline like this. Then let's snap it to the other element like this, and let's adjust its dimension. Now let's delete our reference rectangular spline, and let's continue refining our spline like this. Now I need to round out these corners, and to do so I will use the fillet tool. I will enable it using my shortcut, or by scrolling down here in this menu and click on fillet. Now let's round them out like this. I will also select these two corners and slightly round them out like this, and finally let's select these two corners and round them out like this. Now we have finished refining our rough spline. Now let's create our 2D shape, which will be a rectangular spline that snaps to the borders of the top surface of our shaft. So let's exit the isolation mode, hold Ctrl and click on our shaft, Alt key to isolate them. Then let's switch to the top view, and let's create our 2D shape, which will be a rectangular spline snap to the borders of the top surface of our shaft. Back to the front view, and from the modify panel let's apply a new bevel profile modifier to our 2D shape. Under parameters, choose classic, and let's pick our refined spline. As you can see, we still need to adjust the rotation of the profile gizmo, and to activate it, with our bevel profile modifier selected, press 1, and let's rotate the profile gizmo 180 degrees around the y-axis, like this. And as you can see, now we have finished creating the base element of the crown. Now, let's finish the crown by placing the ornamental element. But first, let's import it from File, Import, choose Import. Let's select our FBX file, press Open. And now we have imported our ornamental element. By the way, we are not modeling this ornamental element here. It's quite intricate, and creating something like this would require a dedicated tutorial series of its own. For now, we are just focusing on placing it to complete our crown. And if you are interested in a series on how to model ornamental elements like this one, let me know in the comments and we can discuss it. And remember this, before editing any imported object in 3ds Max, always reset the X form. It's a key step to prevent editing issues later. Trust me, skipping this step can lead to some really frustrating surprises down the line. And to do so, with our imported object selected, from Utilities tab, Reset X form, Reset selected. Then right-click and convert our object to an editable poly object. Now we have finished resetting the X form of our imported object. Now let's place our ornamental element on our base element. So select both of them, Alt key to isolate them, select our base element, press Z to zoom in, press F4 to enable the edged faces mode. Now I want to create a vertex at the top surface of our base element that is perfectly aligned with the center of our base element in the XY plane. And to do so, let's apply a new editable poly modifier to our base element. Let's switch to the top view by pressing shortcut T. Let's press 2 to enable the edge editing mode. Now let's select this segment and let's click on the ring option in this menu here. Now we have selected this ring of segments. Now right click and choose connect, and I will connect them with a single segment. Press OK. Then I will select this segment and click on the ring option and right click and connect. Now let's switch to the vertex editing mode by pressing shortcut 1, and now as you can see, we have created a vertex at the top surface of our base element that is perfectly aligned with the center of it in the XY plane. Now back to the front view. Now let's select our ornamental element and let's adjust its position until it's aligned with the front surface of our base element. Let's switch to the left view by pressing shortcut L, and let's adjust its position like this. Back to the front view, press Z to zoom in, and let's switch to the uniform scale tool by pressing shortcut R or by clicking on its icon here in this menu. Now let's scale it down like this. And let's disable the edged faces mode. Now let's switch to the left view by pressing shortcut L. As you can see, some of the details at the upper section of our ornamental element is overlapping with our base element. So we need to bend the upper section of our ornamental element so it won't interfere with our base element. And to do so, I will use FFD modifier. But before applying our FFD modifier, let's select our ornamental element, press 3 to enable the border editing mode or by clicking on its icon here. Now press Ctrl A to select all borders, then Alt Shift and drag in the X-axis to extrude the borders. By extruding the borders, it eliminates any gap after bending. Now let's apply our 4x4x4 FFD modifier to our ornamental element, and to activate the control points from the arrow next, the drop down arrow next to the FFD modifier, let's choose control points, or with our modifier selected, press 1. Now let's select this group of points. Let's adjust its position like this and rotation like this until the upper section of our ornamental element doesn't interfere with our base element like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, due to the border extrusion, we eliminate any gap between our ornamental element and the base element. We can also apply a smooth modifier to our ornamental element and activate auto smooth to eliminate any harsh edges due to the border extrusion. Now back to the front view. Now I will use the Symmetry modifier to replicate our ornamental element on the remaining 3 sides of our base element. So let's apply a Symmetry modifier to our ornamental element. Let's switch to the top view by pressing shortcut T, and with our Symmetry modifier selected, press 1 to activate the mirror gizmo. Now let's snap our mirror gizmo to our center vertex that we have created earlier, and as you can see, that center vertex came in handy. Now let's switch to the rotate tool by pressing E, and let's enable the angle snap tool by pressing A for precise rotation. Now let's rotate our mirror gizmo 45 degrees like this. Now let's copy our Symmetry modifier, then paste it, press 1 to enable its mirror gizmo, and let's rotate it 90 degrees like this. Now let's switch to the perspective view, and as you can see, now we have placed our ornamental element on the 4 sides of our base element. Let's select our ornamental element and let's apply this yellow color to it. And now we have finished creating the crown of our pilaster. And before we wrap up, let's delete these floating polygons caused by the Symmetry modifier. So let's select our ornamental element and let's apply an editable poly modifier to it. Now let's press 5 to enable the element editing mode, or by clicking on its icon here in this menu. Now let's select our main element, Ctrl+I for invert selection, selecting the floating polygons, and press delete. Now we have deleted these floating polygons. Now let's exit the isolation mode and switch to the front view, and as you can see, now we have finished creating our pilaster. That's a wrap for part 3. If you enjoyed it, show some love by liking, commenting, and subscribing. Your support means the world to me and keeps me inspired to create even more awesome content for you. Can't wait to see you in part 4 to start modeling the segmented arched windows. Thanks for watching.